Hey everybody, my name is Deja and welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing my August and September wrap up. Today's a good day, everybody. We're back in the car for the wrap-ups. I think there was only one wrap-up that I didn't do in the car, but still, we're back in the car. I got a little Starbucks. You should get some Starbucks too. Pause the video, go make yourself a drink or go to Starbucks. I really love, it's like the chai tea with the pumpkin cream cold foam on top. And I put 3 pumps of brown sugar in it. Delicious. And Drake dropped his new album today. It's an excellent day, everybody. So that means that we're gonna have a great time together today, and we're gonna talk about all the books I read in August and September. And I decided to combine August and September together because I actually only read 5 books for both months. I read 5 in August and 5 in September. So quickly I'm gonna go over my stats. So as I said, August I read 5 books. 2 of those are by POC authors, and I read 1,678 pages. I read 1 literary fiction and 4 thrillers. That's very strange. I didn't even read a horror. That's so strange. I read 2 audiobooks and 3 were read hybrid, which is a mixture of audio with ebook or physical book. And then all of the books I read, all 5 of them were for adult audiences. And for rating, I had 2 2-stars, 1 3.5 star, 1 4-star, and 1 5-star, and all of them were novels. 3 of the authors were new to me and 2 of them were repeat authors. For September, I read 5 books again. 1 of those are by POC authors, and I read 1,803 pages. I read 1 horror, 1 mystery, 1 romance, and 2 thrillers. Again, I read 2 audiobooks and 3 that were a hybrid, and then all of them were for adult audiences. Again, I had 2 3-stars, 1 3.5, and 2 4-stars. All of them were novels, and 4 were debut authors, and 1 was a repeat author. So you guys can see I literally had like 2 2-stars, and I had multiple 3-stars, and only 1 5-star. And I didn't even have any 4.5 stars over both months. So obviously my reading was not doing great, but I actually did a pretty good job reading books that I physically own, so that's exciting. So a lot of these books are also in reading vlogs that have not come out yet. I think like 5 of them or 4 of them. So I'm not going to talk too in depth about those books because I don't want to spoil the reading vlogs and I want y'all to still want to watch them. So my 2 2-stars are both for a new releases thriller and horror reading vlog that should be coming out fairly soon. And so the first one that I read was The Trap by Catherine Ryan Howard. Honestly, this book was extremely forgettable for me. I am having a really difficult time trying to come up with a synopsis, but I don't really want to pull it up on my phone right now. All I remember is about a girl and her sister went missing, but there's also been like a lot of other women who've gone missing. So she's trying to figure out what happened to her sister, and I think this takes place in like Ireland and is related to disappearances that actually went on in Ireland. That's how the author was inspired. But this book, again, it was just extremely forgettable, extremely boring. The characters had really nothing to them that I enjoyed, and the ending was really not my favorite. I feel like it was all kind of pointless. Like, we had like this whole idea of who the main character was and like things that she would do and like how far she would go, and it just kind of like fizzled out. And there was no real like climax. It kind of just like and like that's it. So honestly, it was just like a waste of time. I really wish that I read something else. I think this was actually for a punishment for my spinner wheel. For July, I didn't read all the books, so in August I had to do a punishment, and the punishment I got was that I had to go on Goodreads, and the very first book that I saw that was like on my TBR, I think, I had to read, and that one was technically on my TBR because I had an arc of it. So I did leave my review and everything, but I really just wish I never requested the arc and that it was never on my TBR and I read something else, because it's really disappointing. But y'all will see more of my thoughts in that reading vlog when it comes out. And guys, there's so much going on. There's like, okay, I'm at the public library. I always film in my car at the public library, especially now, because last year, one of our big main parking lots for my school, it would be mostly empty towards like the back, but now there's so many people that it's full all the time. So this one, I always come here, but there's like hella people here today. Y'all can hear the police sirens in the background. Like, there's also this man who was literally sitting on the sidewalk outside the library with his bags, and like he was watching something on his phone, giggling, and now he's like up and pacing and walking around, and it's really distracting. And then in front of me, there's also like construction going on, and like I see like men like on ladders and a big crane. I'm like so distracted, but it's okay. The other 2-star that I read was also for that vlog, as I said, and this was also for the Literally Dead Book Club and the BookTube. I was their co-host. They did like a crossover episode live show, and so I was a co-host. Thank you to Kayla and Gabby for having me. And we read A Twisted Love Story by Samantha Downing. This book again, a 2-star. Originally, I think I gave this one like 3 stars because it really wasn't bad, but I didn't have a good time. And the more that we talked about it in the live show, the more that I disliked it. So this follows a couple, Ivy and Wes, and they are kind of like one of those tumultuous couples where the goods are really good and the bads are really bad. And there's like a detective that just has her eye on them, and she's starting to get like closer and trying to figure out the dynamics of their relationship. But there was something that happened in one of the times that they broke up where somebody died, and we don't know who died, we don't know the context, we don't know anything like that. And so that's kind of like the mystery of the whole book. But in this, okay, you think that Wes and Ivy are going to be like this toxic, very tumultuous relationship, and obviously I think that this is like not a healthy relationship at all. Like, it's definitely not, like, even in the slightest. Like, if this was my friend, I'd be like, okay, like, girly pop, you gotta leave. But for being marketed as a twisted love story and having like this whole thing built up in the synopsis that they do really crazy things, I would think that there would be like more like malice and more toxicity. They just do really tiny things to like annoy each other. For example, she knew that he doesn't like red meat, so she would order steak at dinner, which would annoy him. Like, it's like little things like that is like what they would do a lot of the time to like just piss each other off a little bit. And most of the things that they did were not actually anything crazy. Some of them were, but none of them were really like even malicious. A lot of the things in here were accidental, and like a lot of it, like nobody was malicious at all. And like, for this being a thriller with toxic people, I wanted some malice. I wanted somebody to want somebody else to be hurt or harmed or dead or something, and that never happened in this story at all. And so like, while I was interested because I was like, what's the tea of it all, the tea of it all never even really panned out. And I feel like this is like a lot of like white people drama. Like, it literally is just white people doing white people things, and it's like really not that interesting. Like, there are much better books out there than this one. And now we're gonna move on to 3 stars because I didn't have any 2.5 stars. And so first up is Creep. Let me hold it over here so y'all can see it better. Creep by Jennifer Hillier. This one follows a psychology professor, and she basically has an affair with her grad student, but she decides to like get engaged to her significant other and is like, okay, like, I really want to become committed to him, so I'm gonna cut this off. And he really does not like that and basically becomes a stalker for her and like stalks her and is just really, really crazy. I definitely don't think this one is bad. We actually read this for my Patreon book club pick, and this one is one of our least favorites overall. I think, again, it wasn't a bad book by any means. I just feel like it didn't really have a clear direction. And like, a lot of the stuff that happened in this book happened off page, which I really, really did not enjoy. Like, I wanted stuff to occur on page and it didn't. And like, we would just hear about it afterwards. And I really do not like that, especially in thriller and horror. I don't like it. I want to see it with my own eyes, you know what I'm saying? And so obviously these are books, so we are able to suspend our disbelief a little bit. But she's a psychology professor, and her friend, who is a therapist, is her own therapist. And like, no therapist I know would ever do that. Like, that's literally so unethical. And I know some people have read this, like Hailey, and she really enjoys all of Jennifer Hillier's work. And so when I talked to her about this, she was like, okay, but it's like a book, like, it didn't bother me. But for me, something about that just really bugged me, and I didn't enjoy that that was like in here. I don't know why that was in here. Like, it could have just been her own therapist. It didn't have to be her friend. Like, both parties knew it was unethical and still went through with it, which just seems a little unrealistic to me. I feel like this really wanted to be dark, but it didn't really push the envelope how I wanted it to, and I feel like it could have done more. But I think that's because this is Jennifer Hillier's first book, and she later learned like how to really like write in her style and do what she is best at. I will probably be reading the sequel to this, and I plan on reading the rest of Jennifer Hillier's backlist. I think this is the 3rd or 4th book of hers that I've read, so yeah, I definitely plan on continuing reading more of her work. The second 3-star that I read is one that I just finished. It's the last book I finished in September, and that is She Started It. And this is actually another one of my book club picks. So we kind of had like 2 dud months in a row. Neither of these books are bad, as I said. I give them both 3 stars, which to me is like better than average. Like, I think that these could still be enjoyable for certain groups of people. This one was honestly more like a 2.5, but there was an end twist in it that really shocked me, so I had to raise it to a 3-star. But it's really like a 2.5. I definitely enjoyed Creep more than I enjoyed this one, but this had that end twist, and this didn't have like a twist that shocked me like that. So in this one, we follow a group of 4 girls who have known each other for years, at least since they started secondary school, but a lot of them knew each other before then. And these girls are kind of like the popular girls at school, but now they're all like grown up. And there was this girl named Poppy that they knew in secondary school, and they basically bullied her. So trigger warnings, like if you've been bullied, I feel like this could be really traumatic. I was never bullied, so like I wouldn't know, but I feel like potentially it could be. So these girls like basically used to bully Poppy, whatever, but they haven't talked to her in years, and they all get these letters that they're invited to her bachelorette party, all expenses paid, in the Bahamas. So of course they're like, we're gonna take her up on that offer, because if somebody offered me an all expenses paid vacation to the Bahamas, I would go too. So even though they're like really rich, so like I never understood that logic of like them really wanting to go because they have money, so like they could have just paid for themselves. Like I feel like money for rich people is like nothing, they could just throw it away and like don't even care. So I don't know, but they end up going to this Bahamas vacation, and Poppy may have some plans to kind of get back at them for what they did to her in the past, because while they did bully her, there was also one big event that we are learning about that really shaped how Poppy sees everything and like is one of the defining factors of her life. So we get the present day perspective from all 4 of like those main girls, and then we get flashback chapters from Poppy that are diary entries of when she was in secondary school with these girls, leading up from like the very first day of secondary school all the way until this big event, which was at the very end of secondary school. So we get all of those, and this book just really had like no depth or nuance to it. I feel like all these characters were very indistinguishable from each other. I mean, like the 4 main girls were very indistinguishable from each other, and they really did not have like anything to them. Like none of them really had any big personality traits, or like they were all just seemed to be like horrible people and like had nothing good about them, which I feel like obviously of course that's real, but like all 4 of them being that way is very like unrealistic to me. I feel like some of them would have some sort of remorse or something, or like want to help people in some sort of way, but none of them did. And so it was really hard for me to distinguish them. And like also like this book I think is trying to deal with like betrayal and trust like between those 4 girls as well, but there was never any sense of trust established. I never for one second really thought that any of them cared about the friendship with the other ones, like never. So it really just like didn't matter. And a lot of the book I was like, okay, why is Poppy like doing all of this? Even though it was bullying, it just seemed like a lot, but we find out, and it honestly makes a lot of sense, and it has a lot of clarity to it. And the end twist had me really shocked, shook, and shaken. There is another one, like another twist that comes before it that didn't shock me at all. Like I kind of figured, but that last was, I was really shook, and like it made everything kind of click into place. But this book still had like a lot of plot holes in it, and this did do the isolation setting pretty well, but there was again like plot holes in the isolation setting in itself. And I wish that there was more like kind of like summery Bahamas vibes to make this more of like a summer thriller at least. So then that way, you know, if you want something seasonal that's very summery, that's a thriller, you could pick this up. But it didn't even really have like those summery vibes. So overall it was just like an okay thriller. Like I don't think if you pick this up you're gonna have like a terrible time, but I also don't think you're gonna be blown out the water. So now we're going to get into my 3.5 stars, which to me are books that I would actually like genuinely recommend to people. 3 stars, I think you could pick them up and you'll be fine. But 3.5 stars, I did actively enjoy and would actively recommend them. So the first 3.5 star that I have is The Perfect Ruin by Shanora Williams. This one was one that was recommended to me by Hailey. She gave me this book when I went to go visit her. It took me a couple weeks to read because I've been slumpy. And the only reason she gave it to me, she was letting me borrow it, and then like somehow it got like destroyed in the pool. I did buy her a new one, and it's finally dry after months. It's dry. So this is another thriller where we follow this woman who basically had her life destroyed, and she never really knew from who, but one day she does find out the name of the woman that caused this big tragedy in her life, and so she decides to enact this huge plan to get back at her and literally like seduce her husband, like take over her entire life. And both these women are black. I really did appreciate that in this book, that the characters in this, or like the cast, is mostly black, if not all black, but like race is never like a huge topic in the story. I talk about this a lot on my channel, like black trauma versus like black horror and black thrillers. I feel like a lot of black thrillers and horror are written for like the white gaze and capitalize off black trauma, which can be really re-traumatizing for black readers. And I'm not saying it's like the author's fault when they write that, but I feel like publishing purposely picks books that capitalize off black trauma because white people love to see black people in traumatic situations, whether you realize it or not. White people do, so I feel like a lot of them do that, but this one didn't really have like black trauma or anything in it, so I enjoyed that. Overall, this was a pretty good book. Reading it in the pool was very, very fun. I think if you're looking for like a quick thriller that's going to really kind of suck you in and immerse you in the story, and it's kind of like a bitch I'ma steal your life type vibe, and like has actual like purpose for revenge, and I did enjoy the ending. I thought that the ending was really, really good. I remember the twist and everything, and I really enjoyed the ending a lot. I do think the pacing was like a little slow for my personal taste, but I think that because of the content of the story, it's very engaging, so you would still read it quickly. So overall, I would really recommend this one if you're looking for like a thriller, especially if you want to support black authors. So I had to turn on a little air because it's a little stuffy in here, so hopefully y'all don't hear it too much. But my next 3.5 star is one that I read for a reading vlog that's coming up, and I'm not going to say what the reading vlog is because I feel like it'll spoil it, but that is The Nanny by Lana Ferguson. And this one was one of my most anticipated of the year, surprisingly, because this is a romance, but it follows a woman who has done OnlyFans in the past, and she's since stopped, but she did do OnlyFans in the past, and she is kind of like looking for a different avenue to make income, so she applies to be this nanny for this single father who's like this really famous chef, or he's not famous, but he works at like a really famous restaurant, like a high-end classy restaurant, and he is the main chef. And so she ends up becoming the nanny for him, but then kind of later figures out that he may have been one of her highest paying customers on her OnlyFans. And I love children and romances. I'm sorry, I know a lot of people don't like those, but I love children and romances, and I love seeing the dynamic between the person that's not their parent with the children. And I feel like we got a lot of that in the story because she is the nanny. Like, her job is working with this little girl, so of course we're gonna see that element. So I really enjoyed that a lot, and I liked the chef element, and I think that their relationship was really cute, but it's not like something like my OTP or anything like that. Like, it's nothing crazy that I'm gonna be like, oh my god, like I love this couple so much. I just thought it was really cute, and I liked the smut scenes. I just do think that this book was too long. I know it doesn't look big, but it is a little bit lengthy. I did read it in a day, but it is like long, and I feel like the pacing of this was not great. And like, I'm not like a big fan of like keeping secrets from significant others and stuff like that, and obviously there was that kind of like element in here, and I feel like it just went on for too long for my taste. Like, if you're gonna do it, because like of course like one person's gonna figure this out before the other person, but like holding out for that long and then it just being like you know, like that's just not my favorite. So 3.5 stars, but I would still recommend this one, and I had a really good time reading it because I loved seeing like her being a little nanny, and I used to be a nanny, so I love that. I'm so glad that people actually use the public library. I just be shocked every time I come here and how busy it is, because especially like today, like it's like a Friday afternoon, like fall break for us just started. That's another reason why it's a good day. And so like not many like students would be coming here, but it's just popping. So I'm really shocked, but I'm happy about it. So next we're going to go with my 4-star reads. I have 3 4-star reads and then 1 5-star. So we're over halfway done. And so my first 4-star that I read was Sky Falling. I pulled this one from my TBR jar, and this one I picked up originally because my mom read and loved this book. Like, she wouldn't shut up about it at all. And every time she reads my favorite books, like my 5 out of 5 like favorites of all time, she's like, hey, like 3.5 stars. And you know what? I've had a return favor because 4 stars. This book was really good. This is more like a literary fiction story where we follow a woman, and she just is like a traveler. That's like what she does for work. She just travels, and like she doesn't really have like good relationships with her family or anything like that, but she comes home after one trip and she is approached by this girl and basically is told that she is her child in a way, like biologically she's her child, because back in the day she donated her eggs to her friend so she could have a child because she was having infertility issues, and so she gave her her eggs, and like they weren't like the best of friends anymore, and she like went off traveling with her life and like didn't really think about it again. But now she's approached by this child and like is trying to have this relationship with this kid that's her biological child, but like she didn't have like an actual relationship with, and it's like not her kid. But the mother of the kid, who is the person that she donated the eggs to, is also like deceased. She passed away. So she is kind of becoming almost like a mother figure in her life, but she doesn't have this intense desire to be a mother. She's also a part of the queer community, and she's like also in her 30s, I believe. So she just never really envisioned herself being a mother or like having a child. So now she's having like this weird relationship with this kid, and that's mostly what it's about. And so I really did enjoy the story just about their relationship. I think it was really interesting and complex to see these two people, like one's a kid, one's an adult, going through trying to navigate this really complex, interesting relationship. And so it's more like a friendship type thing, but they're trying to discover a way for them to like be in each other's lives that's not going to be weird, and like discovering each other. And I just really appreciated that. But literary fiction is not always my favorite. This didn't really have much plot to it. It's more of just like character study, which I did enjoy, but I just don't really necessarily resonate with our main character because I'm not in her position at all. I'm not like in my 30s, like never want to be a mother type energy. So like I really just didn't relate to her at all, which is like completely fine. You don't have to relate to a character to appreciate their story, and that's really what happened in here. But I feel like when I normally give like a literary fiction or like more of like a character study like 5 stars, it's because I really related to the character, and I just didn't in here. I would still definitely recommend it, and I think that it's a really amazing story, but it just wasn't an absolute fave. And so next up is Mayfly, which I also gave 4 stars, which I own a physical copy of. I don't know where it is, so I actually own this one as well. And then the next 4 star I actually own too, but it's at home, so I own 9 of the 10 books. That's amazing for me. We love a girl who reads her physical TBR, okay? And so in this book we follow this woman Maeve, and she is basically like a Disney princess at a Disney park, which is very interesting in contrast because she actually has a very dark personality and is very much interested in like the macabre and like does some really like dark things in her life. But she also has her best friend's brother move to town, and he kind of ignites something even darker in her. And that's all I really want to say about this, but this is leaning more extreme horror. I know people have been marketing it as extreme horror. I don't know if I would say it's fully extreme, but it's definitely more extreme. And this is the type of like more like character study book that I like. Even though it did have like this more like gore and violence at the end, it wasn't really plot heavy. But Maeve is a character that I absolutely love and I really relate to. She has like these really normal elements to her. Like she's a Disney princess and she likes to work with kids and she cares for her grandmother, but she's also into some really dark things and does some really horrible things. And I think that's very realistic to how people actually are. Most of us are not one note. Most of us have something that we care about, even if we do horrible things, and we would be deemed by society as horrible people. So I really enjoyed in this story how it kind of explored the dynamics and complexities of her. So that's mostly what the story is about, is really just Maeve. And I think that this could be like a favorite of all time, like a 5 out of 5 star book. But because of the time that I was reading it in, I just don't think I was able to emotionally invest myself into the story how I would have liked. So this is one that I would definitely like to reread and come back to later on because I really did love this book. And this one's also for my new release thriller and horror vlog, which is why I'm not going too in depth into it. I've just been having so much going on and a lot of stuff has been emotionally draining me, and I haven't really had a lot of mental capacity for like much. So I think that this is just one that I really wish I could have given 5 stars, but I just didn't because of the time that I was reading it in. So I really want to reread it. And the last 4 star that I read is Naked in Death by J.D. Robb. This is another one I pulled from my TBR jar. So I'm doing a good job reading physical books, reading my TBR jar for the most part, reading my book club books. Like, I've really been out here eating, okay? So in Naked in Death, we basically follow a detective who is on this case of this death of this prostitute, and that's what they call it in the book. This book is written like in the 90s. So she's referred to as a prostitute, but she is also part of like this very like rich family who's involved in politics as well. So we get a lot of like political stuff in this book, and this one is all supposed to be like in the future, so it does have like futuristic elements in it, which I enjoyed. And this one I feel like is just like a classic crime novel. Like this is like an OG crime novel, but it has a romantic element in it as well because the main suspect of the case, who is also like this rich man, is kind of interested in our main detective lady, but there's also kind of been some other like murders and stuff going on that are potentially connected to the murder of this prostitute. And overall, I just really enjoyed the story. I think it was really well crafted, really well paced. The writing was really good. You could just tell that this author knows their craft and knows it very well. So I did really enjoy this story a lot. but I could also tell those were in like in the 90s, and I didn't necessarily agree with everything that was said in the book, but overall I had a really good time reading this. And the last book that I read was my 5-star, and it's actually a reread. So I literally had no 5 stars except for a reread, and that is The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. This is one where I did give it 5 stars, but it was one like Mayfly, where I feel like at the time when I read it, I just couldn't fully invest myself in the story like how I wanted to, but I loved this even more upon reread. We follow a woman, and she is listening to a podcast one day, and basically through the podcast figures out that one of her college friends was basically committed suicide, but in a very strange way. The podcast is actually made by somebody else that she knew from childhood, and they haven't talked in years, but he's like reaching out like, hey, like, I know that you're listening probably, and if you are listening, like, let's help figure this out, because I don't believe that this was a suicide either. In her friend group, there was also a death of another friend when they were actually in college, so there's a lot of trauma around this for her, but she decides, you know what, like, I'm going to go back to my college and we are going to investigate and try and figure out what happened to her, which has a lot of stuff related to like sex cults and like misogyny and a lot of just that. And there was kind of like elements of that in their past as well, and so we kind of get flashbacks to the past, but then we also get the present. I think this story just is so incredibly crafted. Again, like, it really knew what it was doing, and you could tell that Ashley Winstead really wanted to hit certain points, and she knew how to do it, and she did it. And I think that this was just a beautiful concept, a beautiful idea, and it was paced out so well. Just the themes of it all, like, it was just so relatable. And this one is like really dark, so please look into the content warnings for this book, because I feel like if you've dealt a lot with like misogyny and like men really trying to take over your life and like put you into this like patriarchal idea of what a woman should be, I think that this could be really triggering and traumatizing for you. Potentially. I don't know you, but potentially. For me, I just found it really cathartic, and I really enjoyed that. So this is one that I'm really glad that I reread, and it's just so like incredible and talks about so many different things, so many different elements of the patriarchy and misogyny. I loved it so much. So that's all that I have for this video today. I hope that you guys enjoyed going over these books. If you made it to the end, randomly, we're just going to do the frog emoji today. So if you made it to the end, leave the frog emoji down below, and I will see y'all in my next one. Bye, everybody. I'm writing rhymes in the kitchen, soaking in moments we live in, yeah. You got the nerve to be on me, faking a life that I had you.